Valta PPK. Standard issue, British Secret Service. Licensed to kill or be killed. Take him away. Oh, dear me, I'm awfully sorry. The Rover 45 V6. Based on the Rover 400 HHR. Based on the Honda Domani. Based on the late 90s Honda Civic. Confused? Is that brilliant? Should you care? Well, let's find out, shall we? Rover, proceed.
Here we are with anchors tying us to what we'll call home, even if the sight of it has not yet touched our eyes. And here we are and we're together, even if we are apart. And we're together when we're together, something big is happening among us. It's not as if we don't have to deal with our shortcomings. It's not as if we don't.
So welcome to the West Midlands and yet another episode of Tweed Jacket Reviews. Today I'm in my 2003 Rover 45 2-litre V6 Connoisseur. This is a car that I've had for about a month now, and it replaced indirectly my lady wife's MG3. The history of the Rover 45 is quite a complicated one. It's actually based originally on a car called the Honda Domani, which was sold in the Japanese domestic market in the early 1990s. It was very much seen there as a replacement for the Honda Concerto, and so when Honda and Rover, who were in partnership at the time, wanted to develop a successor to their R8 models, which were normally badged as the 200 and 400, then they decided that they would base the Rover version on the Domani. Now the car has a lot of similarities with the early 1990s Honda Civic at the time, the EG series, later the EK series. They're all very similar. It's all very complicated to work out what's what. But the HHR, as the platform became to be known, was actually brought to this country in 1995 by a car called the Honda Civic 5-door and then the Rover 400. This time, rather than the 200 being mainly hatchbacks and the 400 being mainly saloons, the whole series was just called the 400 hatchback and the 400 saloon. The reason for this was because Rover were in the process of developing their own replacement for the 200 hatchbacks that was called the R3 200. When it went on in 1995, the HHR 400s were priced against things like the Ford Mondeo and the Vauxhall Vectra, which really was a little bit too ambitious for it, because the car is really similar in size to something like a Ford Escort or a Volkswagen Golf. In 1999, it was announced that the Rover 400 was going to be replaced, and effectively a facelifted version would be done, and that was done by Rover in collaboration with their partner at the time, BMW. The 45 was launched sort of around the turn of the millennium, really, and it garnered reviews that were okay, but obviously the range of the design by then was about 8 years or so, because the Domani came out in 1992 in Japan, was a little bit of a problem. However, it really did go a bit wrong for MG Rover, as the new company was known after BMW sold Rover Group to them, as they didn't have enough money to actually replace the 45 and their other models like the 25. So this car continued in production until 2005, not because of anything other than the MG Rover bankruptcy in April that year did production actually stop, and by that stage the car had a facelift in 2004. There are a number of engineering changes throughout the production life of the 45, and this V6 model was only available in pre-facelift guise, only as a saloon, and only with this 5-speed Jatco automatic transmission. The engine in this car develops 150 horsepower, and 0 to 60 miles an hour is about 9.5 seconds. There was also a very close relation of the 45 from 2001 onwards called the MG ZS, and that's not to do with the modern SUV version. This was a Rover 45, but really with extensive body kits and more go in the case of the V6 version, because the ZS 180 developed 180 horsepower from a 2.5 litre V6 engine, but was originally developed for the Rover 75. And those things shift. 5-speed manual gearbox in those. Pretty leery looking car. I mean, you know, if you find that a V6 45 is too slow for you, then you can always go for the ZS 180. Other more normal versions of the 45 and the ZS were a 1.4 litre K-series engine, developing 103 brake horsepower. That was only sold really in Rover 45 hatchbacks, and in the ZS that was only available in other markets, not in this one. Then a 1.6 litre K-series that was sort of a mainstay of the range. That was available in hatchbacks, saloons, 45 ZS, and that's 110 horsepower. Then there's also a 1.8 litre K-series that was available with manual and automatic transmission with 120 horsepower. I'll be doing a review of a MG ZT 120 soon, but with that engine in it. Now the K-series does suffer from quite a terrible reputation for head gasket failure. If you're going to buy a 45 or ZS these days, really someone will have probably already had a go at fixing it by now. The type of gasket you want to get if you need to replace it is probably a Victor Ryan set, and you need to have somebody who knows what they're doing. The K-series engine normally suffers gasket failure because the plastic dowel pins which held the head to the rest of the engine tended to fail in the later ones, and actually head gasket failure seems to be more common in the later cars than the sort of 1990s R8s that also had the K-series engine for some reason. But the KV6, which is in this car, that doesn't tend to suffer too much from head gasket failure, although it's not unknown, of course. Both on a K-series and a KV6, you have to make sure that you change your timing belt, or timing belts in the case of the V6, absolutely at the recommended intervals or before, because that can really cause a lot of problems if you don't. There were also some diesels. That was the Rover L-series diesel engine in the 45 of the ZS, but as you know, we don't talk about diesels on this channel. The trim levels available in a 45 were really quite complicated, and I'm not going to go into them in this part of the review because I simply can't remember them without looking at my secret mission documents, so we will do that a little bit later. What I can tell you is that in the pre-facelift saloon like this one, there were 3 main trim levels available, and based on the trim structure of a 75. So there was Club, and then there was Connoisseur. In the post-facelift models, that would be Club, Club SE, Connoisseur and Connoisseur SE, and then a myriad of different others. Special editions like the Spirit S and the Olympic S and all kinds of things. The main changes throughout the Rover 45's life in terms of the engineering were the fact that there were 3 different gearboxes actually used in the manuals and 2 different ones in the automatics. There are also changes to the electronic system, which occurred in about mid-2003. The pre-facelift cars generally have a Lucas key fob, which is reasonably easy to find a programmer for these days, although not that easy. And I've just had mine actually programmed by Summit Garage in Dudley, which was very good. They are obviously a former MG Rover dealer and still sell MGs to this day. There are services online that can actually help you get your Lucas remote programmed, but if you are going for a car that was made after mid-2003, and particularly if you've got one with the white dials like this V6 has, they introduced the white dials to a much wider range of cars after that time. then you're probably likely to have the rounded remote made by Pectron. Those, if you don't have the barcode that would originally come with the two remotes each car was supplied with, can be almost impossible to program with the car's electronic control unit. So just be aware that if you're buying a car after mid-2003, you make sure you have both remotes and both barcodes. Another engineering change made in mid-2003 was that the K-Series engine versions were actually made to be Euro 4 compliant. So if you're looking for a car for something like the ultra low emission zone, then go for a model made after mid-2003. Bizarrely, this particular car, which is I think a March 2003 registered example, actually is compliant with the ultra low emission zone. I really don't know why. I don't understand that, but you know, there we go. Another thing that was kind of going on at the same time as, you know, all these changes under the skin, which were then accompanied by a later facelift in spring of 2004, was Project Drive. And this was an attempt by MG Rover to actually make the production of the cars easier and cheaper. So in this particular car, we have the steering wheel volume control deleted. We have the seats that originally would have been out of Rover 75 deleted and some slightly cheaper ones put in. Some of the wood, which would have been on the door caps here originally, that's been removed. So there was one or two minor changes like that. Also the rear wheel arch liners were deleted, and the illuminated ignition barrel was also removed. Again, all this sort of cost saving really. And if you are familiar with a certain channel by the name of Hubnut, then you will know about the very early 45 V6s, because Mr. Secret used to have one, I must admit, because I've had a 45 myself in the past, a 1.4 2004 facelift Club SE. I did think about him when I bought this car, but I was mainly thinking about my old one. Now, I had a lot of problems with that car. The head gasket went, I had problems with the body control unit, and because of that, engineering change with the electronics in mid-2003, and all the facelift cars have the round Pectron remote, and they also have a new security control unit or body control unit, and water tends to get in those. And when you have that, then you find all kinds of weird things don't work. Things like the intermittent white doesn't work. You find that windows sometimes don't go up and down properly. It's an absolute nightmare when you have a car with a bad security control unit. Those can be changed, but actually they're in a different place on the cars from mid-2003 onwards. They're actually underneath the centre console, and there's where the bulkhead is and water gets in, whereas in this car it's actually where the battery is at the front of the engine. So why they made all these changes, I really couldn't say. For the facelifted 45s, they have a different type of suspension as well, which is more akin to what the MG ZS has. And Rover 45 actually it rides and handles surprisingly well. It's an awful lot of fun, particularly with this V6 engine, which sounds glorious. Not very economical, of course. If you get 30 miles per gallon out of a 45 V6, you're doing well. Not that really you'll be able to find many of these. There are only about 100 of them left. The ride is not as soft as you think it is actually. It's actually quite firm. Obviously on a ZS it would be even firmer. And the handling's really good. It's got direct steering. It's just a joy to drive. I really love this car for the way that it drives. And that's surprising coming from, you know, an old Rover. It's a little bit cramped in here. The headroom's not very good, but it's nice and comfortable. I've got adjustable lumbar support in this model, and I love the way that it goes. I love the way it rides. I love the way it handles. Just a joy to own this car, and I'm really happy that I bought one of these. Obviously, because it's a Rover, we've had to do, you know, one or two things to it. So hopefully I've increased your enthusiasm for Rover 45 and its wonderful, wonderful, idiosyncratic and complex history. Let's park up and let's see if we can focus more on what's in this lovely interior.
with anchors tying us to what we'll go home even if the side.
Right, we've come back from the test drive and I very much enjoyed that. This car is just sublime, particularly with that V6 engine. Anyway, let's not get carried away too much and look at the car's more practical side now by having a look at the boot. This being a saloon, we've got a proper boot here. Capacity is about 400 litres or so in this car. If we lift the boot floor up, originally this car would have come with a full-size spare wheel, but very helpfully when I bought it, it had been lost, so I've had to replace it with a space saver. These are readily available at eBay for something like £30. There's a boot light in here. There's not much else. You can fold the seats down. It's a bit of a hassle, but if you really want to be practical though, you can go for the hatchback, although you don't get this V6 engine, of course. And there are some straps to sort of tie your things down. The carpet's also a little bit loose in here, and that's a very common problem on these cars. Also in the boot, we find the original stereo for the car. This is a Becker unit, Traffic Pro. Now I had to change this because, one, they're not very good, and it has got sat-nav in it, but the sat-nav is pretty much useless. And also, there was no code for it. Again, the previous owner didn't give me a spare wheel and didn't give me a radio code. On eBay, these are worth actually a fair bit of money, but because I'm a stickler for detail, this will be staying in my ownership and I won't be selling it. I've replaced it with a modern Sony unit, just so you don't complain to me in the comments that the stereo's not the original when you watch it back. Oh my gosh! Oh my gosh! Right. One of the things you're very aware of when getting into the back of a Rover 45, particularly the saloon, is how on earth Rover in 1995 thought that this car was the same size as a Vectra or a Mondeo, because it clearly isn't. The rear headroom is quite ridiculous. This is my driving position and I'm 5'11", and if I sit round like this, I've got no headroom and no knee room. It is quite luxurious though if you're smaller frame, and you've got a nice leather armrest in the back because it's a Rover. Full leather interior, being a connoisseur of course, and some interesting seat back pockets. The seats do fold in this particular car, although I'm not going to do them because it's a bit of a faff. And we've got some nice material on the door cards, although a very common problem on Rover 45s is that the glue comes unstuck, and so they come forward a little bit too far, which isn't the best. And of course, this being a Project Drive car, the wood in the back has been taken off the door caps for the sake of cost. You can really tell this is a car designed in the 1990s because instead of a 12-volt socket, we've got an ashtray. We've also got this armrest, although it's actually hard and not real leather. But overall, it's not too bad in here. You just really wouldn't want to travel too far in the back if you're anything over about 5'5". It's much better if you're the owner of a 45 or a ZS to be sitting in the front, where it's very comfortable, particularly because this is a Connoisseur V6. We have the full leather interior. We have the wood, although sadly not here because this is a Project Drive car. We've got air conditioning. We've got heated seats. We've got an electric sunroof. We've got cruise control that was only available on the V6 models. We've got these lovely fog light switches here because it's got front fog lights. We've got this nice leather trimmed steering wheel. We would have the Becker stereo originally, but we've now got the Sony unit in here, and it's a very, very, very nice place to be indeed. One thing that does let the side down though is this is the same dashboard that was introduced in the Rover 400 and the Civic 5-door in 1995. It has got the wood on it, but you recognise it straight away. It's not a bad dashboard. It's got nice soft touch materials on the top, but a lot of these switches are straight out of a 1990s Honda, like the indicator stalk. The mirror switch is, I think, out of an 80s Honda, and you know, these mirrors, these electric window switches, are a bit haphazard. A lot of cars in the 1990s did have them in the middle rather than on the doors, but Rover and Honda for some reason thought that it would be great to put them on both, which is a bit confusing. The visibility forward is very good, you can see the bonnet and everything. Visibility to the back is absolutely terrible. I would urge you really, if you're going to get a 45 saloon in particular, to go for one of parking sensors like this, although they're not the most reliable sensors I've ever used. The mirrors are very good. These actually are a 75, and of course this being a V6 Connoisseur, we have chrome mirror caps on this car, which is rather good. Automatic gearbox, of course. The car did come with other gearbox options. The R65 Peugeot Rover gearbox went into the pre-2003 1.4, 1.6 manual cars, which was then replaced by the Ford IB5 manual unit, again a 5-speed, because BMW owned the gearbox factory and they decided to put the price up too high for Rover. Way it goes. 2 automatic gearboxes. This is the 5-speed Jatco unit out of the Rover 75 V6, and there was also a ZF Sachs step speed unit which was used in the 1.8 automatics. Right, here are the secret mission documents. First of all, let's see if they fit into the glove box. No, they don't, not at all. Let's try the door pocket. Perfect. Let me read to you a bit from my secret mission documents, because the trim levels on a Rover 45 are very, very, very confusing. With the hatchback at launch in 2000 until 2004, there was the IE, IL, IS, IXL, IXS, Impression S, Impression S2, Impression S3, Spirit, Spirit S, Spirit S2. There's also a couple of Olympic special editions. With the saloon, there's a Classic Club, Connoisseur, Impression S, Olympic Impression S and Spirit S. After 2004 facelift, with the hatchback, there's Classic, Classic FE, Club, Club SE, Connoisseur, and if you're very lucky, maybe a Connoisseur SE. 2 special editions were made right at the end of production, which were the GLI, which had leather seats, but was otherwise similar to a Classic, and then the GSI, which was similar more to a Club or a Connoisseur, and also had a full leather interior, and also the chrome mirror caps like this car. The instruments, we've got these white dials, because this is a later V6, and they look very nice. It says the word Rover here. If you had an MG ZS, they'd say MG there. The weird thing is, if you put the dial on, if you want to see the trip meter, you just have to press this button. It's not visible all the time. What's visible is either the mileage or the trip, not both. You have to toggle between them. We'll turn that off again. The automatic gearbox in this car has a, thank you Sony stereo unit for interrupting my take. The automatic gearbox in this car has a winter mode and a sport mode, also a manual mode. It's a little bit weird, and most people obviously with a car like this will just leave it in automatic, which is what I do. One really weird thing about a Rover 45 of this period is that the service history booklet is also the same as the owner's handbook. They're exactly the same thing, which is a bit annoying if you lose your handbook, because you also lose all your service history. In terms of safety, this car was never tested by Euro NCAP, although they were around obviously in the day. It does have 2 airbags in the front and 2 airbags in the side, and side impact protection bars, but no curtain airbags and no driver's knee bag. For a car of this age, I think it's going to be reasonably well protected in an accident, but you know, not the best compared to a modern car. In terms of the MG ZS, that had a different gearbox, I think, in the V6 version, the ZS 180, probably the one out of the Rover 75, which is a Getrag. The PG1 gearbox, which was on the 1.8 manual and diesel versions, was a sort of old Rover Honda development as well. So that makes a total of 3 or 4 manual gearboxes and 2 automatic gearboxes in this car. The development history of the 45 and ZS is so terribly confusing, but also fascinating at the same time. Like many cars of this era, particularly ones that were developed in Japan, the 45 does suffer from rust, although it's not nearly as bad as you might think. The main area of rust is actually underneath the passenger floor, particularly on cars fitted with a sunroof like this. This car was treated shortly after I bought it for rust, because that did come up as an advisory on the last MOT. It's all absolutely fine now, and that's okay. The other areas they rust is at the bottom of the the car where the doors are just at the front of there, and also the rear wheel arches. It doesn't actually make a difference whether you've got the wheel arches lined or not in terms of the rust too much. This doesn't have any wheel arch liners, but it doesn't mean you get more rust though. Sometimes actually with the liners you've got in the pre-project drive cars, it does make it worse. Other things, of course, the clock in the middle of here, those often fail. As I've said before, the fabric on these doors comes away from the glue, and we talked about the electronics failing as well in the car. But actually, for a car of the era, they're not that unreliable. They're a lot better than, say, a Renault Megane would be, of course. So then, what do I think of this lovely Rover 45 V6? Well, I absolutely love this car. They're not without their problems, but they are very cheap. An MOT 45 starts at about £500. This car, anywhere from £1,500 to £2,000 if you can find one. They're not to everyone's taste, but maybe if you want to go sporty, get yourself a ZS 180. You might enjoy it. Oh, dear me, I'm so sorry. Mr. Bond, we could do a deal. I'll buy you a delicatessen in stainless steel. My name is Joseph Lloyd. I'm an independent vehicle consultant. I find cars for people. Please subscribe to the channel if you'd like to do that. Don't forget to like this video and to leave a comment below. If you wish me to source a car for you, I'd love to do that. My website is www.lloydvehicleconsulting.co.uk. Please use the contact me page on my website to get in touch. I've got a Facebook page as well. It's facebook.com/Lloyd Vehicle Consulting. Thank you. Right, let me back in the front. Okay.